How are you doing, Stepdingen? How's your flood?
Well, it's gone now. It was a bit of a pain, a smelly pain.
Did it stink?
Yeah, of course, it was horrible.
Did it come from the street or from the gutter?
Yeah, it was the sewerage system that was overloaded because of the rain. So, and my entrance pool is a bit below street level. So yeah.
We're live, guys.
Hey, Ray.
Hey, sorry I'm late.
Hey, Florencia.
Hoi, Philip.
Hello.
Hello, Alessandra.
How are you?
Fine, how are you? Philip, say hi.
Hi, Alessandra.
Hey.
How's Montreal? Did it stop snowing?
Yes, finally. Actually, hold on, I have to switch on the air conditioning. It's super hot. There, done. How is Delft? Is it cold?
No, sunny now.
It's
Rainy.
sunny now.
It has been
rain.
rainy.
Ah, it's too noisy. Okay, I am here.
Put the mosaic view when, or not?
Yeah, we will once we
Start.
just do a little introduction, and then Ludo will change that. So are all the students here now?
It's difficult to see without the mosaic.
I think we're still waiting for 6 more, if I count correctly.
Ah, Esther cannot hear us.
Ah, that's why she's not saying anything.
She should try to log in.
Are you talking about me?
No. Sorry, Alessandra.
No, I want to do something else. Switch off the air conditioning, it's too noisy. Oh.
Okay, but so I think we can start.
Yeah, no, I think so too, right? So I will keep my remarks very short. I just wanted to welcome everybody to, let's say this is the third part of the Project Global semester on power being taught by Philip and Sana, who will give an introduction after this. I just wanted to quickly introduce our guests. Always a pleasure to have Alessandra Ponte back at the Berlage, who is a professor of architecture at the University of Montreal. She previously taught at Princeton, Cornell, Pratt, the ETH, and the IUVA in Venice. One of her many projects is she curated the exhibition Total Environment, Montreal, 1965 to 1978 at the CCA, and collaborated on the exhibition God and Company, Francois Delacarte, Beyond the Bubble at the Goethe ETH. And she's the author of, amongst many other things, a collection of essays entitled The House of Light and Entropy. Well, and some of you may, remember Alessandra from past lectures, and she was here last year for thesis. Then we have Ray Sawaki back again, who, well, we all know, but he is an architect based in Tokyo. He was involved in some of our field work when we went there in Tokyo before the lockdown, and he has had the pleasure of viewing the first two parts of this work. Then we have Arjan Sonnenfeld, who is a Netherlands-born architect who is living in Tokyo. And finally, we have Esther, who I hope can hear us, or we will be able to hear her, who is an alumna of the Berlage. I honestly can't remember anymore what generation. I guess generation 22 or 23. And she is a Belgian-born architect who is living in Tokyo. So welcome everybody, and I hand over the floor to, I guess it is Philip, to outline not only the course, but the order of the day also. Thank you.
All right. Welcome everybody. Before I go quickly through the schedule, the order of the day, as Salmon said, I'll have a few remarks about what we worked on and the topic. Yeah, then we can get started. So basically this presentation concerns itself with a first installment of Project Global, as the Berlage intends to proceed with it for the coming years, developing via a technocratic lens insights on the contemporary metropolis. We decided to start this investigation by emphasizing or by starting with energy as a kind of privileged vantage point to understand developments, and we'll continue the coming years in different situations with the emphasis on other sort of technocratic issues. At the end of the presentation, as an introduction to the discussion, Sana, my colleague Sana, will reflect also on the kind of method or the way of working that was applied during the last few months, because we hope we can have some feedback on some of those aspects. In general, we were interested, or as a kind of main topic, we're interested somehow what the discipline of architecture still has to offer within this, let's say, complicated technical environment where issues of climate change, resilience, etc., are somehow omnipresent and all defining. So the projects that will be presented today, all 13 of them, all in their own way, try to carve out a niche to have a specific contribution and also redefine what a project in this context could be. As to the way we wanted to deal with it today, we decided to organize the 13 projects in kind of subgroups, organized sort of consciously to kind of go through the different projects as somehow exponents of these different positions architectural projects can have. The structure of the presentation will be as follows, and it might seem to be a kind of long sit, but we everybody went to hard labor to kind of organize it in such a way that it is yeah, that it will be somehow possible to absorb quite a lot of information. The focus of the presentation will be those projects, but they are communicated in such a way that some of the activities that were done earlier in the semester can be, well, will be still present and referred to. So thematically, the projects are organized in 3 parts. You will recognize, or each part will take between 20 and 50 minutes dealing with a set of projects presented by the students. And then there will be short breaks in between these thematic parts. The break after the second part will be a bit longer in case you, in case you want to have some coffee or just take a little nap. At the end of the last project, so there will be a kind of summary by means of a collective video, which will again go very quickly through all the projects to kind of as a kind of memory aid just before the final discussion. So I want to invite you to maybe keep a notepad or something next to you and to keep your comments to the end, so that we can have a discussion about everything at the same time, and we don't lose the momentum of the presentation. Yeah, I don't think I'm forgetting anything about this, about the order of the presentation. So I'll immediately continue by leading into the beginning of the presentation. So the 13 different projects all have their own particular lens that got constructed step by step throughout the semester. In the first presentation, just after the lockdown started, so essentially a few weeks after we came back from the field trip in Tokyo, concerned itself with a lexicon, which is also present on the website. After that, we went in deeper into the Tokyo area by means of making a number of maps, which was our second presentation. These maps are also, and mini atlases are also on the website. And these together sort of formed calibrating ingredients for then every student to make an individual project. As to the first project, the presentation starts with the first project on a kind of almost meta scale, the kind of scale of geopolitics, where the discussion on power and energy gets immediately this almost bellicose connotations of a kind of global, in the kind of global great game surrounding energy. So I immediately want to give the word to get started to Shawanti for the first project. Thank you.
Do you want me to share the screen?
Yeah, yes.
Please. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So basically, we begin with we begin with the first group, which is which is the Pacific Rim of Energy, and with the project Resourcing Power, which sits on the intro side of the spectrum of these 12 projects to follow. So what this beginning does is basically it opens up the conversation about Japan energy question at a global scale. So here, uh, so so what we are doing now is basically how this project starts is it starts looking into the previous parts and the previous projects, and we see that Japan is essentially a country which relies heavily on its imports. So the trade routes and the countries from which it is importing become very important, as Japan has its limitation of its own resources and also its own land. It again sits into a very peculiar geopolitical situation between US and China, where there is an apparent economic trade war. And Japan has is the only country which has the political will and the military muscle to counter it. So the project Resourcing Power utilizes this duality of words in the power, and uh, proposes resourcing and reallocation of these projects in boundaries and in countries beyond the borders of Japan, like in Australia, which is important to Japan for its import of resources, because it's importing 65% of its fuel consumption from that area, or the Strait of Malacca and Mexico, which become important parts of the trade route, or an apparent omission of China from a transnational grid or the energy scenario that Japan proposes. So the project sits in the framework of an energy outlook 2020 and brings in the discussion through these models. So what now we do is we adopt the voice of Japan and propose the ways to deal with an energy crisis in our own Japan's diplomatic way, basically. So the international framework. So what this report does is provides international framework for a roadmap to address these environmental related changes. The ASEAN report has always looked at three scenarios, which is the business as usual scenario, the ATS target scenario, and the ASEAN progressive scenario. But Japan proposes an integrated collaborative scenario where countries need to come together to form a better global energy situation. And how it does is by proposing the first pilot project of a transnational grid, proposing these three routes between Japan and Korea, Japan and Russia, Japan, Russia, and Mongolia, to look into different modalities through which energy can be transported, uh, looking into questions of security that the nations will come up with. This can actually help all the nations share their resources and provide for a better energy transmission between countries. The low carbon emission is one target that needs to be met, and sharing technology becomes the first pillar of this scenario. So Japan now, sorry. So Japan proposes to give out its technology for the first nuclear power plant in Australia, which it proposes to locate in the Ranger in the Jibru National Park, which is a house to the Ranger uranium mine, which suffered a lot of losses after Fukushima disaster. So basically, this project can help transfer this technology, help revitalize this uranium mine, and also area around Jibru National Park for environmental conservation and others. another important step is to bring in clean hydrogen, which is only possible through this brotherhood of energy. And we know our neighboring nations of Japan have abundant sources of power generation through renewable sources. Like Malaysia has a large capacity to generate biofuel through the waste generated. It's palm oil manufacturing. And the hydropower in Laos can be utilized to generate cleaner sources of hydro generation. Also looking into Indonesia, which is now moving for 117 thermal power plant. Instead, Japan can come in and provide technology and support for building the solar farms, and can also help in experimenting with new ways of energy transfer through hydrogen fuel cells. Energy storage also becomes an important question in this discussion, and it can be done by proposing projects of energy warehouses, where Vietnam and Brunei forms a very important location for these between these countries and for energy transmission. There's now a need to bring the world closer, and which can be done by providing an innovative solution for a tidal power port in Mexico. And as we know, Mexico is looking for new ways and investment in its port to increase its export and import. Japan can help and provide these power ports and experiment with tidal energy. So this is how the project sits. Yeah.
Okay, so the next group of 4 is named growth cultures. And in the island, where basically space is limited, growth as a noun poses a paradox. However, this paradox also stimulates various forms of tackling it. So this group's understanding of growth ranges from its biological connotations, systemic or even philosophical, and ultimately spatial. However, growth also suggests that there are circular processes involved. So to some extent, this group also investigates on the metropolitan loopholes so that it can reconnect them back to the systemic loop. Now we start with Mutsu no Ruto, an Algae archipelago. Mutsu no Ruto is a Japanese word which means the 6th root, and is basically an appendix of Gokaido, which were the 5 main roots of, the 5 main routes linking Tokyo with other major cities. Now, what really fascinated me when I was in Tokyo were these in-between gaps. To pierce through Paris when it's basically to create a boulevard. However, to pierce through Tokyo one simply ought to make a house. These gaps are a consequence of earthquakes. They're a mechanic translation of natural phenomena basically. However, in a city that is suffocating with signs and edifices, they remain the only breathing pause. So I suggest that there is an old and new consciousness for Tokyo. The old perceives Tokyo as a mechanism into translating this natural phenomena into a mechanic and into the territory. And there is this new consciousness which acknowledges Tokyo as an organism. Now with this new consciousness, the in-between gaps become a breathing apparatus of Tokyo. And this is a system which on a small scale goes in between these gaps. And these gaps and this sort of system, it's called the 21st century Maison Domino, and is a prototypical system which infiltrates algae in between the gaps of the building in Japan. it transforms the gaps into synthetic tools of all systems of the house. So basically it uses the wastewater of the house, but also the carbon dioxide of the city, which is plenty in Tokyo, and transforms and basically feeds algae, which help them reduce the carbon dioxide and the production of oxygen. Now, just for measurement, in an in-between gap, which measures relatively 1.4 meters. So basically these gaps in Tokyo range from 0.5 to 2 meters in between the gaps of the houses. So basically in a gap which measures 1.5 meters, it has a depth of 4 meters and its height is 10 meters. It is equal to 70 trees. So it's equal to basically 70 to the absorption of carbon dioxide and production of oxygen to 70 trees, which is yeah, a great number. Now, this 21st century Maison Domino, well, basically it is with this new consciousness that Tokyo establishes its biological revolution in which photosynthesis serves as the modus operandi and algae as its most adored and loyal plant. Now, an algae infiltration means that there is a benevolent virus, basically, which enters systems at different stages, only to make them outperform their old industrial mechanisms. Algae systemic identity rests in quote-unquote circular processes, converting what our cities expel into sustainable raw material and nutrition. Now, these algae curtains are basically made from Photosynthetica, which is a studio which deals with algae. But so basically the originality of this project rests not in its innovative assumptions, but rather integration. So basically all of these phenomena have been proven scientifically. And the way this project implements itself is from the small scale of architecture, then to the systemic scale, which it links to other systems, and ultimately to the territory of Tokyo. The way to where this system basically becomes implemented is in the distant island of Niijima, which is 163 kilometers from Tokyo. However, what is interesting about this island is that it has been a ground for experiments ranging from former launch sites for sounding rockets to today's TEPCO's initiative for sustainable energy developments. It's also interesting that in this island there are 10 to 20 earthquakes with a magnitude of 5 in 1 year. This is an Niijima island, and we can see how this system can work together. So basically, what TEPCO does in Niijima is installment of wind turbines, and then it links to the batteries. But also there is a suggestion to use, these are algae photovoltaics, which also link to the storage of energy. And this system basically becomes part of this algae infiltration, as I say it. And now the systemic architecture means that in order to make this system work, studies suggest that they need to be integrated into major and the general framework of power production or wastewater treatment. So basically the wastewater treatment, it's also very useful to infiltrate algae because it reduces, it has many environmental benefits, but also it reduces the whole process by 50%. So basically it makes it way easier to treat water, wastewaters. Now, it is really interesting how the system actually works in Tokyo, and what would happen if algae infiltrates in this system. Now, I call it a tale of two systems hiding in plain sight, because what happens in Japan is usually when we have these wastewater treatment plants, everything happens underground. And what you see above ground is merely parks or tennis courts and people playing. So in the man-made lands of Tokyo, because basically these are mostly situated in the new man-made sort of islands, which are also used as landfill disposal sites after certain things are being incinerated. So basically in these man-made islands of Tokyo, all kinds of imaginative stories unravel. One might play tennis above the gigantic circular objects of the wastewater facilities. Another might enjoy swimming. Yet another might enjoy swimming in the middle of winter on the 27th floor of a funny-looking building, which on the ground floor is removing large metals that enter large metals from water, which then is pumped up to its upper floor to feed the system, basically. Now, to make things even more radical, what happens in this situation, which is real and it's located in Ariake, is that the incineration plant, which is sitting next door, is burning waste at 900 degrees, and it's and then the water goes basically to warm up the pool. And yet we still think that delirious New York is delirious. So another point which is really interesting, and it's because basically to grow algae, we need large surfaces. Now, one system is to grow them in between the gaps. Another system is to grow them where there are landfill disposal sites, because these sites are usually used for extravagant sports, basically golf and stuff like that. But I think it's way more interesting if they use them, like the metropolitan system takes use of the algae and the oxygen it produces. So basically, how the landfill disposal works is that after things are being incinerated and the bottom ash and the fly ash go there, the way I suggested it, that we link it to the oil refineries, and that the algae which can grow here in this vast amount of land, which some of them are not even used, can go to these oil refineries, which again studies suggest that the oil refineries would need just a little bit of a differentiation, sort of to make them into a biorefinery. And then finally, there are over 1,100 known algae strains, each of them responding to different parameters of the environment. Hence developing various sort of properties that become useful for different purposes. Now, the fractal laboratory, which is the final stage of this project, is nothing less than 1,000 islands dispersed throughout Tokyo Bay, each testing 1,000 strains and providing its necessary ambient. It is indeed an archipelago within an archipelago that tests algae on all possible systemic scenarios. Because in a complex organism such as Tokyo, the laboratory becomes a place of multiple simulations. Now, finally, Mutsuno Ruto considers integration rather than innovation as the basis for urban resilience. It is not about a single system. It is about a multiplicity of them forming a non-hierarchical structure and feeding on the waste of one another. Its extrapolation in 6 basic systems form the basic framework for the future of Tokyo. In this regard, the delirious Tokyo is a thing of the past. The photosynthetic Tokyo is the ultimate future.
The next contribution is Japanese People Institutes. Okay, so this contribution investigates how Japan utilizes, Okay. Investigates how Japan utilizes its national natural given of forests cover 60% of the country and used to be the center of traditional economy. This project is taking a closer look to the main factors. Firstly, it supports timber as the most sustainable option of building that is relevant with low carbon emission production. Circular economy is not new to Japan as it is linked traditional the traditional ways of living, such as the satyamas. And thirdly, if we take a look at the domestic economy and the fact that the domestic needs of timber are met by large importation from foreign countries, we assume that the amount that could have been produced locally. Another issue is that Japan has a very living tradition of timber applications and techniques that need to be strongly reframed in the contemporary way. So the above generate a multifactorial research scheme where opinions and contributions from various experts are much needed. There is need for collaboration and focused research in different levels. This project aims to frame and accommodate such operations in the form of a network of dispersed around the country, and most particularly in areas with extended national forests and tradition in timber work. The building program of those institutes is revolved around 4 main fields of research: building techniques, sustainability, design, and production. Each of those 4 fields relevant labs, research facilities, and workshops. You can see all of them in this diagram. So there are the wood shops, the workshops relevant to design, innovation, circular economy, the labs that deal with the marketing and local production, forest management to control the growing rate of forests, and so on. There are 3 important things to say here. The one is that the program of these institutes is not fixed, but tailored according to the specificities of each site and the seasonal needs of the local industry and community. Secondly, the campuses are not made all at once, but they've been expanded according to the needs and from the main wood shops inside, and it's a proper woodworking factory. So from this diagram, design one of those institutes. This particular campus will be located in Asahikawa, Hokkaido. Asahikawa was selected because it's near of 3 different types of forests and also has traditional in wooden furniture. This is Asahikawa, and the institute is being located just as city, near enough to be in touch with the local industry, but also near the forest. The main goal of this master plan that follows was to show relations and intentions rather than provide a detailed master plan. The relation with the nature, the kinds of labs and workshops, the idea of a forum, the indication of a campus always in making are some of the ideas I try to incorporate here. The campus is clearly divided in 2 parts. The part of the woodshop where experts, craftspeople, and apprentices do research by building, and the more laboratorial part where researchers, architects, designers, forest and energy experts design, strategize, archive, manage, and plan. They are divided for the practical reason of noise, but also because the woodshop generates the rest, therefore it's by itself a very strong sector. The forum, as the common space of discussion and opinion exchange, is the core of both parts. It's extensively during summer, spring, and fall. Whereas winter, those take place in the central buildings of the 2 sections. I'm sorry, there's a problem with my presentation. Yeah. Around the forums are the labs, workshops, and woodshops that fit the central discussion with their own points of view. And the last is this image shows is the fact that there is room for and provision for further expansions. Auxiliary paths show the future potential development of the campus. That is never finished, but is always in the process of scaling up or scaling down like an organism. Lastly, the master plan shows the buildings with different implementations of timber, products of different researches that create a catalog of timber structure, a kind of an architectural item one-to-one. The institutes will host the local and foreign experts, researchers, and practitioners that will organize various annual thematics relevant to timber industry. Those thematics will firstly try to frame the local issues and then connect with a network of other cities to exchange knowledge, statistics, and conclusions. The network is also not fixed, and it can expand according to the need of additional locations. I'm so sorry, I have some problems with my controlling the presentation.
Mar, do you want me to continue controlling your presentation?
No, I mean, I could not control it properly, so I don't know if I made sense. Maybe the files are very heavy. I'm not sure what's going on, but I couldn't change them. That's the problem. So yeah, I don't know what else could.
Did you show all the slides you wanted to show?
Yeah, but I kind of want to show them in a proper way, but it couldn't happen.
No, okay, don't worry. So we go on right to the next one, right?
Yeah.
So next project is mine. And it's called Shokuniku. And the Shokuniku market in Shinagawa is the only slaughterhouse in Tokyo, which means it supplies meat to the whole Kyoto area. And the location of it is quite central. It is located close to the Shinagawa train station, surrounded by shopping area and high-rise office buildings. The remove of Tsukiji market makes me think of the same question for Shokuniku market. Tsukiji was the largest fish market located in the center of Tokyo. It was removed to Toyosu in 2018 to a relatively outer space. And some pictures of Tsukiji market and Toyosu. And the same thing happens with Lea House. The market in the center of Paris is removed to Rungis market in 1969, which is quite far away from the center of Paris. Yeah, this is a picture of them. But for the slaughterhouse of Anderlecht in Brussels, it still remains in the city center. So yeah, based on this, I started with two scenarios with Shokuniku market. One is to keep it in the city center. The other one is to push it out of the city center. And if we keep the Shokuniku market in the city center. And from the population density map of Tokyo, we can see the Shokuniku market is located in the high density area. As a daily consumption, fresh meat needs to be delivered to the supermarkets and restaurants in time. So it's a good choice to keep it in the central location. And for now, all the cattle and the meat are transported by truck. The Shokuniku market is close to Haneda Line Expressway, and which means it has a good transportation efficiency. Also, the central location is good for the employees' daily commuting. Yeah, and for the second scenario, if we push the Shokuniku market out of the city center, although we can keep the slaughterhouse in the central part, but the problem is that it's an isolated industry. From the book Peak, we can learn that the byproducts of meat have so many relations with other industries. based on the isolated situation of Shokuniko market, the logistics chain would consume a lot of energy. If we push the slaughterhouse out of the city center, it would be a good choice to combine it with other industries. So from the website of Shokuniko market, I learned about one of the most significant byproducts of the slaughterhouse is leather. So I chose leather industry as an example. And almost all leather industries are located in Sumida-ku, especially alongside the Arakawa River in the north. This is because of the large demand of water in the history. And this is a satellite photo of this area and some leather factories there. The leather factories are all small scale, mostly composed by less than 10 people in a family business mode. These are how the leather factories looks like. And this is the interior of the leather factories. And I searched some information about the leather industry process. And basically it needs these 12 steps to make leather. And also I searched some information about the slaughterhouse. It's too bloody, so I blurred some of them. The key image is how they skin the cattle. This is how they skin the cattle, and there is a chamber to collect the leathers. And this is a proposal for the combination between slaughterhouse and the leather factory from the perspective of logistic efficiency between different industries. I think it would be good to remove the slaughterhouse to make a combination with the leather industry in Sumida world. So based on the situation of the slaughterhouse and the leather factories in Tokyo, I would like to bring the leather industry close to the slaughterhouse to make a new Shokuniko market, which name is Shin Shokuniko. And for the existing Shokuniko market, there are slaughterhouse, washing area, market, office, and water treatment center. And considering the high density in Shinagawa world, it's hard to develop a new block for leather industry. So I add the factories on top of the existing slaughterhouse. The factory is connected with the slaughterhouse in the washing area, where they can share water facilities and transport leathers efficiently. The water treatment center of the slaughterhouse would also be shared. I add meat and leather retail stores to this project. By extending the existing skyways, the stores could be connected with the shopping mall and office building around the slaughterhouse. I also attached the visit pass so that people could learn about the process of slaughterhouse and leather making. Yeah, this is an exploded diagram. This is a function composition of the slaughterhouse and the leather factory. Some perspectives outside of it, and how the people visit the leather factory and watch it. And compared with the high-rise buildings around it, the slaughterhouse is quite a low-density block. This gives the possibility to add more related function to it. So I would give a future vision that is making this block a mass of different slaughter-related industries. Yeah, and that's my project. Thank you.
So now it's my turn with the project called Grow Your Carré. I want to start showing a little video. Is it possible to make it full screen, Juan?
I was trying to, but it seems that no stuff. Sorry.
Maybe from Drive, no?
Well, maybe this.
At this scale.
Let's just
And I think that everybody goes back, goes to the website itself and watches this particular film, since that's the whole project. And then we come back into the Zoom room.
Yeah, that could work.
Why don't we do that?
Let me share the link in the chat.
Yeah.
You can watch it directly here. Do you see the Vimeo screen?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Music is off now. I still have control, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Grow Your Career utilizes the iconic MS silks to give an insight in the realities of producing luxury items on the one hand, and to stimulate a small but still existing domestic industry on the other. Grow Your Career is an imaginary long-term MS campaign that lets customers adopt the 3 trees necessary for the production of 1 scarf, in exchange for a discount upon purchase. MS wearers will become part of the production process themselves, as they host the compact and easy mulberry trees in their gardens, balconies, and roof terraces all over the city. The special team will take care of maintenance and harvesting, which means that the customer can simply enjoy the green in their outdoor spaces. By stimulating participation among private individuals, MS will contribute to a greener and possibly cleaner Tokyo. Grow Your Career is at once an evocation, giving an insight into the very real disconnect between luxury shoppers in Tokyo and the distant and intensive making of their desired goods somewhere else, as well as a serious solution, utilizing existing knowledge, traditional skill, and available space in tackling an admittedly small part of manufacturing locally. By overlapping production and consumption landscapes, Grow Your Career stimulates an awareness of the scale of this operation and aims to positively contribute to fostering local craftsmanship and a greener inner city. through a combination of an aesthetic, language typical for MS scars, and the abstraction of production landscapes within a long-standing ideal city tradition, that which may seem frivolous is dealt with in a highly rational way, without losing sight of the pleasure involved with quality products. It connects the scale of the urban and the landscape, that of the interior, and finally, the object. As such, Grow Your Carré is also an encouragement to look beyond the superficial and to find beauty in the complexities underlying our consumption patterns across a multitude of scales. Thank you.
Do you know Family Mart? Have you ever been to a Family Mart? No? Don't worry, you can find at least 3 Family Marts within 5 minutes walking in Tokyo. It's opening for 24 hours a day. Anything you can imagine for daily use, you will find it in Family Mart, so don't hesitate, let's go.
Arrêtez de vous reproduire.
Blackman South Museum, Ghibli Museum, Shinamachi Museum, Yokohama Ramen Museum. Stop! I know you're not excited. So how about breathable architecture and sculpture? How about the new Algae Museum in Tokyo? Don't waste your time. Call now 192-345 and get a free ticket. We have.
Every year, Her Majesty the Empress cultures her silkworms and harvests the cocoons at the cocoonery.
Pia twist to pia sak sak ku ya kare twist to sak sak to rin dun 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 kare pia.
Okay, so for the following group, it's called Interstitial Strategies. It's formed of 3 projects where we deal with the in-between fabric of Tokyo, where not a particular topic is approached, but many of them forming a system or a network. So open space and infrastructure. Well, we start with with Tokyo, the practice of demolish and rebuild. Its history with earthquakes, fires, rapid economic growth, and market economy has led them to develop a practice of demolish and rebuild, where all the attention goes to the land. The question that arises is how to develop an alternative for dealing with collectivity within the low-rise, high-dense areas. High density in the low-rise areas has shaped most residential parts of Tokyo. They are characterized by its wooden houses and its changes in the morphologies of the urban fabric, where chaotic fragmentations produced by the high inheritance tax that has pushed people to subdivide their plots into tiny portions where tiny houses are being built. The government concern for lack of green spaces in these neighborhoods, as well as for being vulnerable areas in the case of a fire, has led them to arrangement with private investors to replace rows of houses for multi-story buildings. Nevertheless, it seems important to understand the variable of livability that these residential areas represent. They are arrangements according to the human scale as a counter-proposal for the megastructures. At first sight, it might seem that there is not an open space in the current residential areas, but cemeteries and parking areas as the back garden of houses. However, walking through their streets, we can start finding small parks that starts to emerge. These parks serve as places to fulfill the strategy for the evacuation areas according to the Disaster Prevention Plan, together with the Urban Park Act, which started in 1956. These parks are not much but surfaces with lamps and benches. In Tokyo, well, the Urban Development Plan for Disaster Resistance was established in 1995 and revised in 2010. It will be again revised in 2020. In the plan, areas with closed set wooden houses that are likely to suffer major damage in the event of an earthquake have been designated as development districts, which are marked in light blue. Among these districts, those that urgently require redevelopment to enhance disaster resistance are designated as priority development districts, which are marked in dark blue. Altogether, they are connected by a principal disaster reduction network, which is shown in red. Accordingly to this action plan for 2020, it consists in advancing projects aimed at strengthening the functions of these metropolitan parks, key as a disaster management. So the aim of the project is to frame open space as a structural device, looking for the opportunity to open a centrality within the low-rise residential high-density neighborhoods. The project objective is to create a framework for the possibilities of reusing those parts and deploying them as a series of growing infrastructures, which are combined with a disaster prevention plan with an aware of consumption behaviors, productive scenarios, and communal activities. From the group from Fiore from Fumihiko Maki will help us allow to frame the project from a system that starts with a disaster plan with the idea of group from Fiore from Fumihiko Maki plays a role in the structure of the project, whereas he understood the group form as the buildings that have a reason to be together by the process of mediating space, defining, repeating the action, and making a sequential path. However, we are looking for now an open spaces that have a reason to be together, by categorizing, identifying, defining, making a sequential path, and spreading them around, creating a master program that understands and deals with time, space, infrastructure, and zoning based by a set of rules that merges form, time, and program. And within the priority development districts, residential areas with urgency are identified, from where spaces are categorized accordingly to its size and distance in relation from users. From a garden, which is less than 250 square meters with a distance of 100 meters, a courtyard, a plaza, or main square for 4,000 square meters with a distance of 1 kilometer. From here, all the systems compositions for residential neighborhoods may vary accordingly to the existing urban fabric and may form diverse compositions, having a support as the main square as its support. In this example, we'll be looking into the residential area number 1, where we first start by identifying the plots that could be developed as a garden, courtyard, or plaza, or main square. And once placing them in their category, we can start speculating in the future growth of them from their possibilities with the immediate plots, understanding the changes of the urban fabric of the 26 years and the changes of the land use, but where the garden can later become a courtyard and a courtyard can become a plaza and so on, as well by identifying the key evacuation areas and our bases of research and rescue operations. The second part is that we're going to start defining these plots by the conditions of the plot and its possibility to grow and its role in the disaster prevention plan. Technical details are added per system. First of all, the water garden, which is 160 square meters. It consists of a rainwater collection, which later connects to the main path, a drinking fountain, a light feature that it's produced with the electricity of the plaza. The second one, the courtyard, is 500 square meters, is composed by a rainwater collection pond, seasonal trees, contemplation slope, and a light feature that is fitted by the plaza as well. The third one is the plaza, which is a 2,000 square meters, where we find a pavilion with solar panels, where the electricity goes to the inverters and the batteries to later be distributed to the courtyard and the garden, a rainwater collection pond, a drinking fountain, seasonal trees, and gathering areas. And the main square of 5,500 square meters, which contains a pavilion, a geothermal productive and educational area, pumped from geothermal energy, which later connects to the main channel, and rainwater collections and a gathering area. Making a sequential path connected with existing evacuation path accordingly to the disaster prevention plan, and adding them with water harvesting paths and electricity production and distribution within the parks. They create a network where elements join together. The notion of collective structures will allow varieties to coexist and integrate in a comprehensive urban strategy, where shared efficiency, distribution, and generation are considered, which will later be spread around Tokyo's residential area, where individual structures are accumulated in a quantitative manner. Looking into Tokyo's residential area, freeing its space for its residents' livability and for the city's security, forming an alternative for dealing with collectivity.
Okay, hello. My project is Meta Billboards, and it's basically a system of billboards powered by the energy industry stakeholders. I started my presentation with this image of Nishikie, which was a colorful wood print from the Edo period. This was from the Echigoye store that would sell kimonos at the time. And this form of advertising, as a form of a flyer, would depict in itself the streets of Tokyo and how these buildings would show symbols, signs, and images in the storefronts as a way to advertise what was being sold inside. So in a way, the flyer itself would contain a form of advertising in itself. During the oil crisis in the 70s, an array of advertisements appeared both in radio, television, and printed mediums such as newspaper to address the current oil crisis and the raise of awareness to save energy and resources. This in particularly was promoted by Nippon Oil, titled "An oil tank this size will empty in 5 hours." And the image shows a photography of 400 children forming a big circle the size of an oil tank. So in a way, yeah, at the same time, the main medium, which is advertising in a way, has an environmental agency. So in a way, my hypothesis is that the machinery of communication directly affects the metropolis, and advertising becomes an environmental agent. The territorial implications are rendered through a set of illustrations that spatially depict and speculate on advertising campaigns conveying the current Japan's energy industry consumption. The first one is in Ginza. This is the Sanai Dream Center building, which is advertised as a building that it's 100% a billboard, and it's powered by renewable energies. That's why it has solar panels and even wind generation on the roof. But then, of course, Ginza is a collection of buildings with setbacks and different heights, but all of them have this second layer of billboards on top, taking advantage of the surface and like the intricate spaces that they leave behind in between them. And this one in particular is speculation on the different sources of energy in Japan in a comparative how much they represent in the whole energy consumption using the billboards. The next one is the TEPCO substation and data center, the TEPCO building in Toyosu. And this one speculates on how the whole building could be transformed in an LED screen billboard, advertising the discourse behind the corporation, which in this case would be the stable supply of electricity, or the smart meters, or the activities that TEPCO is taking into place. The following is in the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. During its decommission and its putting into place the safety measures, it becomes a visual campaign in itself, with billboards and signs and symbols, with tourists visiting the place, and the Japanese government aiming to convey that the nuclear power plants that are coming back to Japan, let's say, are safe now. So in a way, the site in itself become a political conveyor of messages. The following is a kind of counter reaction to the previous one. In the site of TEPCO, the Commissioning Archive Center, the former TEPCO Museum, a giant billboard is installed in the outskirts of the town of Tomioka, less than 5 kilometers to Fukushima, even less, I believe. And this campaign goes not only against nuclear power, but also to the nuclear experimentation and usage in countries. So in a way, it's related to the site in itself, but it's also a campaign that exceeds the location. And then on the following 4 cases, I focus on systems that are not entirely site-specific, but are part of a bigger system that are spread throughout the city. So in this case, this one is a system of billboards in bus stops and street furniture, such as these little billboards that are placed in the streets, with speculating again how they could convey a campaign that addresses or are triggered directly by these energy stakeholders. In this case, I analyzed the MCD Cox as the Japanese branch of GCD Cox, the bigger street furniture advertiser in the world, and how they occupy these kind of corners or in between and public spaces in the cities. They have become extensively known in almost every country. The next one is a system of mobile billboards in trucks that they also use the truck, the sound as a message conveyor as well. And in this case, it's speculation on the development of the T-Green multi-solar, which is a new kind of facade, and a company that develops facades and systems to generate power through solar. Then again, the system focuses on the printed banners in the Yamanote line in this case, but in general in the train station and public transportations in Japan, and how these carriages have become a place where different sorts of advertising happens, from events to products to services, but in this case a more relevant or discussion around energy production. And finally, the mascots in Japan are kind of this cute and happy part of the culture there, but also they have become a political tool in the way that governments and local governments use them to engage the public in certain aspects. And in this case, this character of Pikachu related to electricity became a part of a campaign all over the world, actually, protesting Japan to stop financing coal plants and fossil fuels. So in a way...
I'm sorry, Jack, I need to interrupt. All of you are taking way too much time in presentation. It's already 4:15, and we would like to be able to have a discussion about this work. And at this moment, it's not possible. So I think, please wrap up your presentation.
Yeah. So yeah, just to conclude, the image is the Ginza block, and kind of in this white blank notebook where all these messages are conveyed, and in a way the architecture becomes, the billboards become the architecture of persuasion. Yep, that's it.
Hello. So light is perceived to be necessary for orientation. In the nocturnal context of Tokyo, illumination appears in different and various settings. Orientation becomes a nuanced instinct as illumination of buildings, digital advertising, and traditional lanterns in narrow streets allure the person on foot. Tokyo's brand and identity is connected profoundly with light, but is that much light needed? 6 points of interest started an understanding of the basic sources of lighting and in the urban landscape of Tokyo, which can lead to an insight on the ways it shapes the metropolis. First, aircraft and warning lights are high-intensity lighting devices attached to tall structures as collision avoidance measures. Such devices make structures more visible to the aircraft and are usually used at night, although they may be used during the day as well. These lights need to be of sufficient brightness to be visible for miles around the structure. Continuing, lighting up a monument or a landmark links mainly to entertainment reasons, attracting more people to the site. It creates the feeling of social safety and cohesion in the city, while also creating an identity landmark for the people. Apart from being an attractive type of lighting, it turns out to be extremely wasteful because of the surface it covers and the use of it, sometimes all day long. Street light and street lamps get lost in the center of Tokyo. Being a part of the infrastructure, they hold the useful task we all know anyway, but being able to actually notice them becomes a difficult thing for pedestrians and even dangerous for motorists and other people using the street. The image of Tokyo, as we all know, the digital billboards cause high levels of light pollution. So this is also a main point of interest as well. So the intensity of light from 1,000 LEDs that are used on digital billboards in the face is much greater than lighting of conventional signs. Traditional measures of brightness don't accurately reflect this intensity, which makes the digital billboard stand out from its surroundings. Street signs and street lamps easily cause light trespass, which is unwanted light intruding into a person's property or area of concern. Not being a place of high interest to tourists, these can also be found in near dark areas and secondary streets, mainly forming a network of dimmer light in Tokyo. And final, traditional lighting which is or lighting that comes from smaller houses or shops, so smaller scale. These are a closer look to the traditional light setting of Japan, forming a more interesting shadows and also engaging more with the darkness. The use of light the use of lighting is easier to analyze and study through these parts of the day, with exceptions also to billboards and other types that could also during the day. So the high interest is mainly at night and in the middle of the night. So light pollution map shows how it distributes around Tokyo, with the center of Tokyo reaching the highest levels of magnitude per square arc second. This map also corresponds with the 4 light environment zones of Japan and how they're formed. So we have the dark landscape, rural and suburban areas, urban residential areas, and the urban core, so the center. In our collective imaginations, cities are meant to be bright, but as studies begin to show, that much light can be detrimental to health issues. So are cities actually getting too bright for our own good? That's the question. Even though through digital billboards using energy efficient LED lights, so actually Japan using the latest technology, the sheer number of lights in a single sign and the fact that these billboards have to be brightly lit in order to be seen during daylight hours turns them into energy hogs, actually. Light pollution and light trespass are more difficult to quantify, so finding a holistic system to work with light regulations in Japan would be invalid as part of Japan follows voluntarily guidelines through without binding force. With the latest technology being used, the problem being worse, the elimination or reduction of sources during the middle of the night within the urban core of Tokyo could lead to the night sky being unobscured in some level and reducing the sky glow phenomenon.
$527。何も見えません。
節電ね、節電。
今年は我慢しないとな。
これくらいの方が大事なものが見えてくるわ。やっぱり家族。いた、
誰だ尻尾踏んだの。違います。
違うわよ。
電気つけろ。
Looking for parking. Magic. Paraka.
Today, we'd like to introduce to you the town of...
It's time for an extra trip to Nihonbashi.
し東京に潜む隠された謎に迫る。
おばあちゃん、テプコ歴何年？あ？
おいおい、
ねえ、ただの
余計なことす。危ないぞ。先生、あれ？
待ってたわ。テプコ。
停電や雷雲などの情報をプッシュ通知でお知らせ。テプコ速報。
え？何？
いや、近く通ってな。
え？何？
グラファイト剣道、グラファイト審判、グラファイトチアガール、グラッと来て、グラファイト告白、グラファイト失恋、グラファイト悲しみの雨、グラファイト体温計、グラファイトメガネ、グラッと来て、グラファイト告白2、グラファイトはシャープシンです。
何も見えません。
節電ね、節電。
今年は我慢しないとな。
これくらいの方が大事なものが見えてくるわ。やっぱり家族。
誰だ、尻尾踏んだの。
違います。違うわよ。
電気つけろ。続きはテレビで。
ようこそ神戸のあたり。ライトは2月21日見上げると戦いを見た。ナショナルライトはあなたを歓迎します。
SNS で相手を検索、予習は常に抜かりなく、友達チョイスは躊躇なく、キャラかぶりは絶対 NG。 言えるアクセスケアライス
していることだろう。寿命10年 LED は
Take a 5-minute break, Philip, Sanu.
Yes, we start back again at 4:30, 6 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
Play the music.
ずっと昼と夜が逆の暮らしを続けて流行りのディスコで踊り明かすうちに覚えた魔術なのよ I'm sorry 私のことを決して本気で愛さないで恋なんてただのゲーム楽しめばそれでいいの閉ざした心を飾る果てなドレス
Is Hend making a speech?
Watching television again. Are we good to continue?
Yeah, I think we are good.
Okay. For the following group, Wiring Realities, we look at the as-found condition of the Japanese territory and its expansion from its inland area towards its exclusive economic zone in the sea. And we also look at the high energy consumption of vending machines that appear every 2 steps to the overcrowded underground of Japan that ranges from isolated objects to completely connected networks. The first project, Hinterlands of Power, is a collection of territorial hinterlands anchored to specific points that frame new spatial possibilities within the energy system and its related objects. The electricity industry in Japan is managed by 10 privately owned government-granted monopolies, each of which operates a certain region. This model was adopted in 1951 while still under American occupation. The territory that each company occupies is defined by the administrative division of prefectures, the country's first level of jurisdiction. The boundaries are what they call physical boundaries, a natural occurring divide between 2 areas, mountain peaks in this case, Shirasuna, Shiroma, and Sanomino. The project proposes a panorama in a place from where to look at the energy systems. It is a model fragmented into 3 didactic objects, a mountain cabin, a viewing platform, and a rest area, all scattered within an invisible circle that departs from the shared coordinate. Views are framed inside the mountain cabin, and tower binoculars are directly pointing to the horizon, suggesting the possibility of looking at a nuclear power plant from afar. The electric infrastructure of Japan comprises 2 incompatible power grids. The West, that built its grid based on the American 60 Hz system, and the East, that built its grids based on the German 50 Hz system. While there are enough power plants in each of the grids to supply with electricity if there are spikes in demand or outages, the fragility of the system is evidenced when there is a big unplanned shortage of power. While the idea of a unified national frequency is economically and politically unreachable, Japan can only hope to improve and extend their conversion capacity between grids and simultaneously make an effort to conserve electricity. The Electricity Expressway evokes the issue of the imminent disaster. It is a prototypical strategy to bring stability to the grid and expand the inter-area power wheeling initiative promoted by TEPCO and Chubu. The expressway carries 2 transmission lines, one from each half, with transmission pylons every 300 meters that arrive to the new Nagano Tokyo Frequency Converter Station. A series of renewables, such as power plants integrated to large-scale storage facilities, systems that countermeasures frequency control and balances daily demand supply. A new Okutamasu station at one end of the expressway, and a new Kawakami expressway substation located on the other side of the expressway. The southernmost point of Japan is a flat table reef comprised of 2 rocks that are typically visible 90 centimeters above the surface of the water. The island of Okinatorishima, with the zip code registered in the Tokyo Prefecture, is an incredibly ambitious project that reflects the country's effort to sustain a territory and the benefits that come with it. The small rocks entitle Japan to 40 square kilometers of maritime territory, a seabed that is believed to be rich in minerals and gas. Consequently, over the last 50 years, Japan has taken a series of actions for the purpose of Islandization, including a lighthouse, an observatory base, a maritime research and weather facility, and a quay to allow large vessels to dock. With facilities in the neighboring Akajima and Tokyo, it has spent large amounts of money on research for breeding coral reefs, and sent by various ways that could turn Okinatorishima into a natural artificial island. But perhaps the most ambition of them all is construction an ocean thermal energy conservation plan that utilizes the differences in temperatures in the sea to generate electricity. The Island of Ambitions is an index, a master plan of as if everything that was ever suggested would happen. On stage 1, the artificial bank for coral breeding is implemented. In the middle, dividing the atoll in 2 halves, the sediment control islands directs the growth and spreading of the coral towards the west. Construction for the OTEC begins with a depth of 900 meters. Stage 2 contemplates the first artificial islet, and installing houses for human habitation and areas for aquafarming are delineated. For stage 3, Okinatorishima has proved economic activity and introduces accommodation for tourists, a heliport, and deep sea mining facilities to extract oil and gas, as sea bottom resources have successfully been identified after years-long survey. The result is a sectional characteristic of all buildings forming a line in a kind of umbilical display. Through submarine HVDC cables, the power plant feeds the rest of the island. The 3 territorial hinterlands of power intend to bring physicality to the invisible lines by using as a vehicle, as a tool, the topics and discussions these specific points trigger. Thank you.
If I may. The second, the second project looks into Tokyo's cultural fascination with robotics and Tokyo-based background with artificial islands that today run along the coast, sets the context to correspond to the industries in the nearby area. As a result, the proposal seeks to improve the efficiency of automation and robotics technologies and its introduction into the urban reality. The site is a new artificial island that lays within the Tokyo Bay in the water outskirts of Tokyo. It shares the fragmented morphology of its context, which industries mainly thrive through industrial and energy purposes, sharing the body of water with some of the most relevant ports in the country. According to the International Federation of Robotics, Japan is the leading producer of robots in the world, supplying more than 50% of the global demand. As a consumer, the country places fourth as to the number of robots installed per every 10,000 workers, with 303 robots in 2016. The robots also have a particular cultural connotation in Japanese culture, that to ease the image of robotics and the introduction of automation, its biggest ally, the anime, have portrayed Japanese robotics towards a more amicable companion, rather than the job-stealing robot we all fear. Moreover, automation is their answer for the replacement of the elderly workforce and to make up for the lack of young blue-collar workers. Year by year, robotics in Japan have permeated into more and more complex jobs and less functional, such as for hospitality and companionship. The artificial island, on the other hand, is a new reference to the collection of artificial islands in Japan from the island of Dejima, the Dutch trading post nearby Kawasaki in 1641, to the metabolist proposal of important figures like Enzo Tange, Arate Susaki, and Kisho Kurosawa. Nagasaki. The artificial island have been materialized through Tokyo's land reclamation and Japan's newest airports that solve the issues of land appropriation by building new man-made land. The island of robot testing takes inspiration in the experimental island of Nijima by becoming an urban laboratory for automation and supplying facilities for the improvement and efficiency of the industries and the ports nearby. As a programmatic reference, the Fukushima robot test ground, thanks to this example, and many other robots test sites of academic and institutional purposes around the world, the program for the island was laid out. Motion testing, outdoor testing, drone, mobility, port services, hospitality, rescue, construction, sports, and parking all have a place in this little island. The morphology of the island is taken from the surrounding areas, such as the beach that would serve later on for real site testing. As you can see, the context, it's filled by some amusement parks and industrial artificial islands that already exist. The island has a program of which facilities try to make up for the lack of automation in these industries within the context. So the first one is the most, I think is the most important, is the motion testing building, which parallel linearly programmatically runs 3 parallel lines, one with the control rooms, 2 with the motion testing obstacles and like water tank testing, and then 3rd with the outdoor testing, which also provides a series of obstacles for robots. The blue structure, it's a common language that run across all buildings with the yellow crane. The yellow crane, it doesn't not only supplies the construction for the building itself, but then afterwards it works as a flexible tool for adaptation and dynamism. So here we can see a section of this robot test island where human and robot are dependable from each other. Here is the drone flight cover or enclosed test field, which allows for 24/7 flights with no, and it doesn't matter about the flight restrictions. This is the port of entry. This is the the dual multipurpose field with physiotherapy and entertainment-based facilities. This is the construction automation block, which 4 corners tend to provide the stack housing. And so it makes it like also dynamic, and it's always on construction. This is the detail of the plan where they would 3D print the stacked houses. The automated parking tower as an object of the urban fabric of Tokyo. The port mock-up, which tends to provide space for the testing of all these new technologies in port to make it more efficient. The commercial strip for hospitality. Here is the commercial strip and how the robots will supply all these services. The mid-rise mock-up, the sunken housing, and the village mock-up will be integrated to not only house all the visitors and workers of the island, but also to run inspections and rescue missions. To conclude, the island fully embraces automation, bridging the process from testing to real life by fading the division line into a project where direct feedback enhances and speeds up the development of new technologies. Automating the city rapidly might mean a higher energy consumption, but it improves exponentially the efficiency of systems by mitigating human errors. In a long term, it might be the only solution to sustain demand by having the opportunity to produce 24/7. Automation is the end of day and night, of exhaustion, of sleep, a city which is actively producing all day, all year.
Okay, this project, the bear, the mayor, and the vending machines talked about the fact that existence of vending machines and its energy consumption is undeniable. Then how to make this system have a better purpose? And this project is based on a true scenario. And start from this list of countries by electricity consumptions. And it is obvious to see Japan is one of the countries with large energy consumptions. But Japan is the smallest nations and less populations in the list, so Japan might be ranked higher. And Japan is well known on its variety and popularity of vending machines. And if we use the basic unit to examine a vending machines, it consumes approximately 120 kilowatt hour per year, which seems not so much. But if we collect all 4 million vending machines, it costs totally 5 billion kilowatt hour per year, and which is close to 1 nuclear reactor to generate power for a year. So vending machines is considered inefficiency. Okay, but from several aspects, could understand that vending machine is essential in Japan. And most importantly, these machines have already become a system and merged into Japan's society. And so vending machine is like a vehicle which could provide certain things that is insufficient in an area. So under these circumstances, it leads the questions to how to utilize these vending machines more efficiently and what role could these existing system be? And to answer these questions, I choose Kasama-shi as an example to see what these existing systems could be. And Kasama is a countryside near Tokyo in 1.5-hour transportation distance. But the town is facing the problem like most of Tokyo satellite towns have, which is depopulation and aging. So Kasama mayor, in one of his policies, aims to build a regional healthcare center to deal with the medical demands from old and young people to confront the issue. So for this example, vending machines could be the vehicle for providing medical services for being as the mayor's practical strategy. So here I'm going to introduce 3 types of medical vending machines. This type A mainly provides the service of selling medical products to the locals, like mask and painkiller. And it works like a small pharmacy and is installed space for room temperatures and low temperature products. And type B is an automatic dispensing machines that mainly providing medicines to those patients who have certain demands, such as chronic or fever. And patients could buy in different ways, depends on their demands, like for 3 days packages or for 2 weeks. And since it sells the medicines that should be regulated, so to use the machine will be more strict. And using the machines needs to attach a personal health ID card and doctor prescriptions. And type C is like a small health hub, which could automatically examine a user's body conditions like height, weight, and body pressures. And another functions is that it is also equipped with the system to draw and test the blood. And users' health condition will be printed immediately and sent to doctor directly. So depends on types. Each type of vending machine distribute with different numbers, which is based on its functions and what distance is comfortable for an elder people to reach certain machines. Like here you can see for the type B, it might take like 50 meters for an elder people to reach, and yeah, so on. So basically type A is a general one, and it has more numbers and the distributions is more. And for type B, besides the distance, it could be placed near the people. Here you can see who have special demands like old or disabled or close to the hospital or clinic to be like an attached facility. And since it also has the function to record patients' informations, and each machine is also connected each others and with the type C as well. And for the type C, it's a medical hub, so it has a virtual functions to connect to each type of machines, and also link between individual patients and hospital. So it is convenient to use their phone or laptop to book or check the products and service. And so finally, if these existing systems could work efficiently, it could be linked a new way. It could be like a new way of social services systems in everywhere, such as the PET, and depends on the demand for the local to give the task to the vending machines. And this is about all the project. Thank you.
Well, hello. My contribution is called Deep Underground. This contribution is based on the holistic idea of an underground prototype replicated through the Japanese territory. In Japan, buildings are buried under mountains, urban areas, and underwater, adapting their function and shape to its context. The project arises from the findings of the transmission mini atlas that we previously made, where we found out that the overcrowdedness of the underground territory of Tokyo, and very crowded with subway lines and buildings and tunnels. Daishindo, which translates to deep underground, is a land use law stated in the year 2000 for the metropolitan area of Tokyo, allowing the public use of underground area below 40 meters or deeper for building roads, sewage removal and drainage, electricity lines, tunnels or rivers without giving notice previously to the landowner on top of these areas. The constant competition for land in Tokyo leaves no other choice for developers but to build below surface as much as technology allows them to, because the root system of a city is invisible in the end and from street level, and the quality of the soil is uncertain. So yeah, after this starting point of the mini atlas, the main goal of the project is to classify case studies on 3 categories. The first one being half buried, the second one ground level, and the third one is buildings completely buried. So the prototypes are classified by the relation with the surface because it's the main conditioner of an object. So a building level with the ground is different from a half buried or fully buried, as one has deficiency on ventilation, and daylight implies like different spatial conditions. So after doing this catalog, I speculated for each of the groups. I speculated one prototype. So this is the first prototype. This is the Shintoyoshi substation that Jack previously showed, which is a TEPCO station in an urban area. Then is the Koyosan substation that is in the also in an urban area. It's a electricity substation built under a Buddhist temple. And then the third one is the Kasenoto, that is the ventilation tower of the Aqualine in Kawasaki. Yeah, that is floating in the middle. It's a man-made island floating in the middle of the Aqualine. And then this is the speculation, that is the project, that is an artificial speleology prototype. So to get into detail with these buildings, I developed a section that shows the contrast between the uses. So as we can see, the building is half buried and half underground. These buildings have different uses. This one is a data center on top, and underground it has the electricity substation. Then for the Koyosan temple is the Buddhist temple on top, and below is also the transmission power line connects there. Then the Kasenoto is the ventilation tower that helps the highway that goes under the Aqualine with cars ventilate this whole highway with this massive structure. Then this is the proposal to have an underwater ryokan and pachinko where people, so there is a ventilation tower that serves as a viewpoint, and then the pachinko is located in the darkest area of the building, and then the ryokan is underwater with a panoramic view of the underwater. Then the second group is the ground level with the Kasukabe underground discharge channel that helps to protect Tokyo from floods and typhoons. And then is the depth scraper, which is an ideal city never built in 1931, where the Japanese were already speculating about how to protect the population from earthquakes. Then is the Ali city, that is also an ideal city, where they also wanted to build an entire development underground. And then this is the speculated project. In each category, I speculated in the fourth case on the right. So in this one, to get into detail, for the Kasukabe discharge channel, these tanks, they are held with pressure. Through pressure, they kind of help Tokyo to be safe from floods when the sea level rises. And they also introduced this truck to carry out maintenance to tank. Then this is the depth scraper where all housing units are put underground. Thanks to this mirror that is on the top. Then is this Dali city with the whole development of houses and commercial uses. And this is the proposal, which is an artificial speleology, where speleology, for those who don't know, is the exploration or study of caves. So people can come here and use this. It takes the main fundamental idea of recycling these tanks, so people can come and carry out these activities. Then the last category is the buried one. So this one is the prototypes that are fully buried in the middle of. This one is the mountain Aikino. This is the Kagra gravitational wave detector, which is buried 500 meters underground. Then is the Super Kamiokande, that is 1,000 meters under the Mount Aikino. You can see the section. Then is the nuclear waste repository that is also underground, very deep, like 600 meters underground. And then the proposal is to reuse one of these ideas, that is the Super Kamiokande, to convert it into something else. So then again, I show more in detail these case studies. The first one is the Kagra one, where there is some human interaction with it, and it travels with the lasers. Some of these objects are part of a wider system. For example, this one is part of the Virgo or LIGO system with the United States. So they are a part of a research facility worldwide. Then this is the Super Kamiokande, where people, so it's a neutrino detector where it needs to be underground in order for it to detect neutrino waves. And yeah, people go down to make maintenance in the water tank. Then is the nuclear waste, vitrified waste tank, where they vitrify the nuclear waste in order to be, to make it safer and then bury it underground. And then this will be the speculation project, where the Super Kamiokande is reused because it's already 1,000 meters underground, so it will be reused to be used as a message for the future, because nuclear waste is very dangerous. So they usually use these semiotics that explain for the people that will find this tank in the future or for future generations that they should like keep away from that because it's very dangerous and it will be very negative. It will have very negative effects. So yeah, in a nutshell, the only environmental and economical solution for the overcrowded Japanese territory is to continue expanding underground, finding new prototypical combinations to utilize unused urban and rural areas. So the 3 underground spaces proposed transform technical research facilities into inhabitable spaces as engineering is transformed into architecture, showing opportunities that could improve the underground Japanese territory overall. And that's it.
Yeah, so now we're gonna zoom out and have an overview on power generation in Japan. And we look at the past and then take a journey into eternity. So this is kind of gathered section of power generation in Japan. And I think it's necessary to point out that prior to the 2011 earthquake and then tsunami, Japan was generating 30% of its electricity from nuclear reactor, and aimed to raise that share to 40%. But then after the disaster of Fukushima, this number dropped to 0. And so then at that point, Japan was basically in a kind of perfect environment with the Kashiwazaki Kariwa, the biggest nuclear power plant in the world, generating 80,000 megawatts, and with the ambitions they were behind the fast breeder Monju reactor. So Japan was going towards a kind of ideal model, so the French model, where with a system that it's basically clean and efficient, where nuclear would have functioned as baseload and hydropower would have functioned as peak load. So then this is a timeline that tries to trace back to the deployment of nuclear power, which is unequivocally related to both military and a civilian program. So there are certain moments that are certainly they need to be pointed out. So the moment when this box of nuclear power was open was in 1939 with the letter signed by Albert Einstein to President Roosevelt, which was informing of the potential harmful power of uranium collision. And then after, we see in World War II how this actually happened with the two bombs. in Hiroshima, so the uranium bomb, and in Nagasaki, so the plutonium bomb, which got drastically then during the Cold War. But then in the meantime, General Electric Co. was already counting the potential benefits of nuclear power. And also USA was pushing a propaganda to push nuclear power in Japan. And in 1966, Japan built the first nuclear power plant at Tokai. Then it gets to a point where basically there's the world oil crisis happened, and so this of course leads to basically to half of the nuclear reactors basically were built during that time. So there is a reborn of nuclear power. This till the Chernobyl disaster, which then put a heavy brake on the development of the nuclear industry, which then get back again, especially in Japan in 2002, was producing 30% of electricity from nuclear power till the Fukushima disaster, when the electricity generated by nuclear power plants dropped to zero. So then, after Japan started a new energy plan, and 24 units were restarted. But Japan is still dealing with the consequences and still dealing with the decommissioning of Fukushima, and dealing with the ever increasing issue of waste. And in that case of waste, which is water contaminated by radioactive material. So then the point is with nuclear power is that it's technologically and economically, it's a box that when it's open, it becomes almost impossible to close. And that goes especially related to the issue of waste, and in this case of nuclear waste. So this is the Mombetsu nuclear waste repository, located approximately 4 kilometers away from the port of Mombetsu, and it is a deep geological site which will store nuclear waste in a permanent way. And it's a site that goes deep 500 meters in order to store this nuclear waste in a permanent way. So at -5 meters, there's the level where the boreholes are placed, and therefore where the canister with nuclear waste are placed. This is the entrance to the repository. This is the control room, which is something that always needs to be there when it comes to nuclear power because of the vulnerability of the material. This is the canister being bored inside the borehole, and this is let's say after all the boreholes are filled with canisters, then the whole tunnel gets filled. And after all of the tunnels will be filled, then the whole geological repository would be filled. And nobody should actually know of the existence of this place. And it will stay there for an eternity, because plutonium has a radioactivity that lasts 80,000 years. So this site would be there for at least 100,000 years. Yeah.
Look down in the water. It's a whale. It's a boat. It's
風の音
風の音風の音
風の音
風の音
secret codes, signals, and a mysterious language.
理解注意。コード40、ファーストフィニッシュ。
Arrêtez de vous reproduire.
Do you know Family Mart? Have you ever been to a Family Mart? No? Don't worry, you can find at least 3 Family Marts within 5 minutes walking in Tokyo. It's opening for 24 hours a day. Anything you can imagine for daily use, you will find it in Family Mart, so don't hesitate. Let's go.
東京に潜む隠された謎に迫る。
そしてちょうどいい位置を走れるように技術でアシスト。2年連続日本の車でナンバーワン N-BOX。
Do you want to visit the metropolitan area outer discharge channel? Try our new VR app now available in the App Store and Google Play.
Graphic 直線ウサイン・ボルト直線東京ベイアクアライン直線409。
何も見えません。
節電ね節電。
今年は我慢しないとな。
これくらいの方が大事なものが見えてくるわ。やっぱり家族。
誰だ尻尾踏んだの。違います。
違うわよ。
電気つけろ。
続きはテレビで。
僕はペッパー。
In the beginning, there was man. Then man made the machine in his own likeness. Thus did man become the architect of his own demise.
So before the start of the conversation, I wanted to quickly refer back to the course structure, but maybe first ask our guests, since we are a bit behind in the schedule, if they would have time to stay a bit longer.
Okay. Yes, no problem.
Okay.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, a bit.
Yes, so then as Philip introduced, we set up the semester in 3 parts. We started with the lexicon, which was built up of the lemmas that you saw presented now in the form of the commercial breaks. And in this section, we took the perspective of the oligopticon, the opposite of the panopticon, in which all can be overseen at once, which is an idea and term coined by Bruno Latour, which he uses for his Paris description in Paris Ville Invisible. And this was a reference for us to start the semester with. So this narrow perspective on technologies and systems was given form through a focus on objects and spaces, images and institutions, and an exploration of the related design aspects. For the project, it was a first step in identifying power-related systems and their components, but also in looking at the way these systems are represented by the relevant stakeholders, looking at public opinion and how this is formed, systematic weaknesses, the role of failure, and many other things. In this form, the lexicon and catalog provided input on various levels for the broad spectrum of architectural projects that resulted from part 3 and that you've just seen. Then second was the atlas, that is built up of a set of maps that explore the territorial impact of the energy-related systems on different scales, 13 maps in total. And continuing from this, there were 6 mini atlases developed, also Philip mentioned that, that went deeper into the energy cycle, related to the different parts of the phases of the electricity network, from generation to transmission, distribution and consumption, but also to raw materials, to waste, and to the energy cycles involved. The atlases, they map out the characteristics of the territory, like the delimitation of the urban areas, their transition into rural lands, the infrastructure networks, the typical conditions, but also singular points of interest. And these were all taken up as parts or as context for the different projects that people started working on later. As well as, so the mini atlas also, they linked objects to systems to these specific geographical characteristics. So all these 2 parts were collective parts of the work from which everyone could pick their ingredients and propose individual architectural projects, which you've just seen. And I'd like to refer back to our initial aim, or one of the aims of the semester, to really explore the possible scope of ways of dealing or engaging as architecture or architects with the theme of power. So these 13 projects, they offer a variety of skills and genres and attitudes. They both directly address energy systems, but others also deal with topics that were derived from these. Some projects, they really focus on revealing a condition, and others more aim at solving one. And many actually hover in between. They address technology and aesthetics, but also geopolitics, public opinion. So I'd like to start the conversation by inviting our guests to share their thoughts on the whole set of the 13 projects and the way they actually achieve this exploration. Maybe to start with, Alessandra, would you like to?
Oh, okay, fine. Well, first of all, my congratulations. It was a pleasure to watch. The level of representation was fantastic. It's beautiful. The video, the drawings, I really enjoyed it very much. And I'm invited because I've been dealing with these problems in my own research. So I have a lot of things to say. About power, energy, and but especially the question of extraction of natural resources has been very much my topic. And in fact, beginning with the first presentation, in the fall, I was in Australia at UT Sydney as a visiting professor, researching mining in Australia, and actually we came to deal with Japan, but a lot of coal. How much coal is used in Japan, by the way, in terms of power? I was missing that data. Okay, we got
almost 60%.
60% is coal. Yeah, and it comes from
I
Australia.
mean, not coal. 60% is general fossil fuel. So it's mainly coal, but then there's LNG, and then.
And the other thing that while I was there, so the other thing that was happening in terms of extraction and exports of Australia was lithium. That is now is becoming, you know, the white gold. And lithium is essential to make batteries, and it's becoming like one of the big game today in terms of talking about green energy, renewable, and this and that, because the batteries, and talking about robots, automation. So all of this is powered by batteries. And the big problem is, you know, we are not going to solve anything with batteries. That's why I've been following Bill Gates' idea about atomic, going back to atomic and rethink all the technology of the atomic. I think this is like a discussion to have. And also because I was assisting in Australia, I was there right at the beginning, you know, Queensland was already burning. And when I left, I don't know if you pay attention what happened to Australia, the fires. It's catastrophic. It's absolutely catastrophic. And again, this question came back on the coral thing. So because all of this is actually quite related, you know, the climate change, renewable energy, extracting lithium instead of coal. And Australia is a big producer of lithium. The other big producers is the lithium triangle in Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. But it's like another, you know, the target of the multinational industries now. So the coral reef that is being bleached by the coal industry in Australia. So all these processes are connected and should be, you know, should play roles. So this is like sort of comments. So it was a brilliant analysis of what you were saying, but at the very beginning, so the cycles of energy and the, you know, international corridors of energy, etc. So, but maybe you should go deeper into this question of exactly what the alternatives are. Because when we talk about the other projects like robotics and robots, so it's also related. Are we going to have autonomous driving car with what sort of battery? Or, you know, let's forget our cell phones that needs also batteries, but they are, you know, it's a minimum amount of cobalt and lithium. But if we are talking about a car, that's a big thing. Or powering a city like Tokyo, forget it. It's no way we can do that, you know. So these are so this should be part of the equation of most of the projects. So to deal, you know, deeper on what are the alternatives. Are we actually, can we green? You know, can we go green effectively? And so it's like big questions that are open. So but I really appreciated the work you did in general. And then I have like individual question, and I wanted to do, you know, individual comments for every project. Let's see, a couple of projects. I don't know if it was mentioned to you, the work of, let me see, what was the one, the gaps between buildings in Tokyo that becomes briefing spaces. Did you see the book of Nicolas de Monchaux? local code?
No.
No? And also the other one that is the open space as infrastructure that transform interstitial spaces again in sort of public spaces, green public spaces. Okay, I
is the one referring to the in San Francisco Bay, the work he did?
He did, but
landscapes in San Francisco.
He did more than one city because he did it also in New York. So it was inspired by the Gordon Matta Clark work that was called real estate. Gordon Matta Clark started to buy, properties in New York. In fact, properties in New York that were too small to build anything there. So and he did a collection of these unusual spaces. So Nicolas de Monchaux took this idea and sort of digitally transformed it and proposed the usual of these unusual spaces in system to in a complex system for drainage, treatment of water, waste. He did this exercise in another way, in a number of spaces. He started, maybe 10 years ago, and then he did many reiteration dealing with problems that are similar to yours. So maybe look at that. It's a book that came out called Local Code. So it could be interesting. The other, maybe at random, and maybe well, in general, I was like interested that you guys carefully avoided any reference to the pandemic. Why? Because you are in the Netherlands, or it's not happening? This became sort of like for me, it's sort of, I realized this for in this sort of flash. Especially with the problems about the aging population and the vending machines that becomes, a sort of pharmacy for distributing medications. Because, in fact, I don't know enough about how Japan treats the aging populations. What do they do with the old people? Because it's all over the world. I mean, Canada, the US, all over Europe. So the people that are dying are the people in retirement homes or long-term care centers that are becoming death traps. And it's not that. But in general, all these countries have a problem with aging population, what to do with them. And also they have big problems with rethinking medical cares, because all over Europe, like from France, but in Canada, it's even more evident because of the geography of Canada and the fact that most of Canada is not inhabited. So what we are creating all over the place are medical deserts. So this is like, so there are no hospitals, no clinics, no doctors. And the big question is to create, and they're thinking about using the new information technologies, artificial intelligence and remote access to medical care. First of all, for the aging populations, but then in general for the population in rural areas of the US, for example, there is nothing, no hospitals, no clinics, and no this, no that. So I don't know what's happening in Japan in relation to that. So it's a big problem now, the question of healthcare. And it was a big problem even before the pandemic. So because this is the trend. I don't know so I would be interested in knowing more about Japan, not just about the care about the aging population, so old people, but in general, what is happening with the fact that healthcare is becoming extremely expensive. And so let's say in France, if you have like bad forms of cancer or you need an operation, you have to go to Paris or Marseille. Because in the middle there is nothing. So, so this is what is happening right now. So in terms of medical care.
I don't know, maybe how can say something, because I mean, that it was one of your mayor played the role of kind of as an example, no, to kind of have this question about, I mean, the aging population, but the medical care as a kind of generalized issue in all developed countries, but specifically also Japan, no, that it's a question of access.
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention in the presentation is like he said, this project is based on like the true scenario, the real scenarios in Kasama City, because I did some research that the Kasama City mayor, he like we mentioned in the presentation, he want to like build the regional medical centers to solve this kind of problems. And one thing I saw on his strategy is he wants to build like a digital, to make the medical information digitalized, and then use this virtual system to create, to make the how do you say, to make the medical resources could become more comprehensive. And I think this idea is quite similar to match what I was searching about for the vending machines. And the other strategy for him to deal with this kind of the problems is he tried to make one thing I didn't mention is that the Kasama City, they also have to deal with the problem is the empty housing and space. So they try to because of the depopulations. So they try to reburnish these space to become like health centers, and also like the place for kids, and like parents when they are busy. So there will be like a kindergarten place for kids that the parents, they don't have to worry about their safety, something like that. So yeah, I think this medical issues in Kasama City is that they, yeah, because there are like the third strategy I can't really remember, but from the first and the second parts, I think to build like the digital systems like community, it's quite the ways to deal with this kind of the lack of labors. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, given the context today, what everybody is living, you know, but you know, the question of medical care that is really changing in incredibly fast.
Maybe I can add something to what Hao said also in response to this. I think the way it maybe compares to, for example, France, where it was also sort of hotly debated already before the virus. It's, I mean, and it's interesting also because it seems that for a lot of these issues, the specific Japanese context seems to be a kind of extrapolation or a kind of extreme version of what maybe we're all sort of, you know, what all kind of developed nations in their kind of decline or going to face. I think the particularity in relationship also, I mean, in comparison to France, is that the kind of proportional replacement of this kind of skilled work which medicine tends to involve in the French context or the European context is also highly related to the immigration question. Like, how do you basically have people to do certain type of jobs? I mean, if you saw the images of the retirement homes, the kind of caregiving or this kind of work is a particular kind of job which is highly sought after, because there is essentially not enough people who want to do that job. So it's sort of tied to also the question of where that labor comes from. And I think in a more general sense, that question of labor in relationship to this kind of jobs, it goes to the automation question of Felipe's robots in the end. No, that's a kind of the horizon, the horizon of everything is this. So I think also there is a kind of, it's always a kind of discussion that's balanced out by different ingredients, and I think they kind of they come together. But I think on a basic level, it's very similar to the kind of French situation, but minus the amount of immigration that France has gone through, let's say.
Yes.
In a kind of more homogeneous context. I don't know if there is other things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alisa.
Yes, yes, and I was also thinking that some of the projects, in fact, you said it, that they create an infrastructure, they communicate together. I think the one dealing with robots and robotics should, go, should sort of infiltrate or most of the rest of the projects, because this is where, everything is going, seems to be going. And I know I am aware that I was aware that Japan has a different attitude, for example, in relation to robots. That, let's say, other developed countries, and they are producing a lot. But again, so it's still, what are these robots going to do? Are they going to have human shape? How do you train them? What constitutes the training of the robot? So if you do a training center for robots, maybe you have to be specific and how they're trained, by what? By artificial intelligence, who is training them? So all super interesting questions, and they're trained to do what? To take care of aging people, to take care of children. Can you trust children with your robots? So it seems very interesting if you pose the question that you are like creating an artificial island and having there a training center for robots. It could be, interesting to say, okay, where, how do you train them? So yeah.
Well, these are questions that are more into specifics, but AI was actually a subject that came out, and that's why everything is about feedback. I was reading why these robot test sites exist in the first place, and they all talk about the endpoint is real life, mass production, marketing, all this stuff. No. And so one of the means is a lot of feedback, is error and fixing, and little details there and there, that it's only allowed by feedback, but user feedback, and also all these monitoring that they do in these control rooms, in these motion testings. So I think I just reached the point where I try to touch upon the most generic or general ideas of the introduction of robotics into the reality of Japan. Also, talking about the robots and this job stealing discussion as well. There I read an article that said that in Japanese culture, it was more likely to culturally accept robots than foreigners, than people that come in from Philippines or Vietnamese or that they usually do all these blue collar jobs. So that's also one of the reasons that it's a program led by the government as well.
But maybe another, I mean, in relationship to this, it would be interesting because you stated yourself, Pepe, let's say the question in relationship to the energy consumption. I think the kind of non-psychologically or what people would feel about whatever, but it would be interesting to understand what the energy balance would be of a kind of massive automatization compared to actually creating massive amount of jobs. To what extent this kind of all these people you need to do this job supposedly, what is their the energy they need, so to speak, right? So it's interesting to kind of understand it also, based in function of this, how certain activities can be maybe at first insight be extremely energy consuming, but they remain physical. I mean, it's not the energy consumption of the technology which has kind of expanded our minds, which is the technology we always insist about. No, it's telecommunication developments, all this kind of thing, more on the intellectual side. Well, and that's also what artificial intelligence is involved with, but then also the real mechanical aspect of the robotics, the old-fashioned robotics that is an extension of our muscle power. Of course. Maybe that's quite an efficient way to extend our muscle power in this way, rather than organize extremely large amounts of middle management to organize what is essentially that kind of work.
Well, that's also why I introduced the crane idea, for example, in the building process, but and also talking about this human error as a tendency to waste a lot of energy in human errors. Once I saw a documentary that said that Mexico wastes 50% of the water on leaks. So this efficiency, it's all about this efficiency of resources as well.
And to go back to one point Alessandra made, or when Alessandra said she's disappointed we're not dealing with the virus.
No, I'm not disappointed.
I mean, I think
I am surprised. I say I'm surprised.
Well, we're not in denial, but the thing there would be that one of the kind of more apart from the general economical malaise, it's interesting to kind of put the economics, let's say, of the virus period next to whatever the proposals were regarding to what is this called, the kind of what is this called, the in Netherlands basisinkomen, how do you say that in English, like the basic income questions, to basically replace the radically the kind of welfare state by a kind of
citizen salary, something like that.
Exactly. Right, that basically in at least in a European context, on paper these last few months we're sort of almost there. I mean, that's basically what the states are doing, except of course I mean, maybe not in every sector, but it basically said that that was possible for the time being. That this question also relates to this issue of the automatization. And I think the energy question comes in as probably one of the more stringent resistances to these developments than the actual economical framework is. It's simply the availability of energy resources and the fact that, I mean, we saw the commercial break with the peak oil and these kind of things. that if there is a restriction on fossil fuel, history shows there is a decline in the kind of economic growth. So the question becomes how to deal with the decline in economic growth, rather than, and maybe these kind of topics which we've always associated to growth, robotics, etc., more and more and more, could actually be functional in buffering, or in basically to accommodate something that is not growth, but something else. Whatever might happen instead of that. I don't know if there was other things.
I don't want to dominate the conversation.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Or what the other reactions. So, and then the students can react to other reactions. Maybe somebody from Tokyo.
Okay.
You have something to say?
Start off then. What should I say? I'll start off with all the 13 presentations were the story was very nice. The graphics were very nice. It was very pleasing to watch. And what I was thinking about was, like, how do you say, the common factors within the projects that I was interested in was that they are the ones that dealt with the problem of the kind of big, large scale kind of system. And when that meets the reality, what happens with that? Like when they are dealing with that in a clever way, I just thought that is the, the role of the architects can do within this kind of big, large scale. The question that Philip and Sana was bringing up for this topic. And then within the presentation, I really thought the commercial break video, that Family Mart thing going on again. I thought that was the most kind of interesting part of the whole project in a way, because it captures this kind of idiosyncrasy of Japan, but yet that idiosyncrasy comes from this kind of whole large system bigger than than the Family Mart. But then when that meets a reality, it has this kind of like weird aspect to it. And then to kind of capture that is like the kind of most interesting part of architecture. So the projects that were doing that was like the ones, the Hinterland of Power, like deep undergrounds. They were tackling this like very big scale projects that architects cannot like deal with. But yeah, when that kind of like large underground thing becomes an architectural object, then you start to understand what is the interesting parts of it, or what are things that architecture has not dealt with yet. And I just thought that these projects are very nice, whereas some of the projects were just diving in to try and introduce a new system within like a new system. And then they just kind of tackle the topic of the system too much that they forget what happens when that thing is implemented to the reality. Or else, on the other hand, there are projects that are looking at like too much of the reality, and then it doesn't really connect to kind of bigger scale, so it loses its kind of like strength as a story. So I think that was the kind of like whole, how do you say, impression I got from the presentations today.
I think maybe, I think it's an interesting point. I hope maybe you can also react to it, but because Ray, your point brings it to this question of the role of the A project or D project, or all these kind of possibilities. And this impacted also, I guess, the way we organized the order of the presentation. Remind you, we ended basically with the disappearance of the project, or the infeasibility of it, thanks to Marco. No, it's a kind of same. The project has disappeared from the section, but at the same time, I think the projects are indebted to each other because they kind of create each other's discomfort, right? There is always something that is maybe under emphasized, that is highlighted somewhere else. So maybe in addition to what you say, Ray, it might be interesting just in general, at least that's what I notice now, that there is a kind of benefit in having this sort of coexistence of projects, right? Because they somehow start to complete each other or challenge each other. So yeah, I don't know if
go ahead.
That's true, but at the same time, what I was quite surprised was that like each project, it's very like they're all very serious. And what I want to say here is that like within the videos or like within your researches, you guys are always kind of trying to find these kind of weird Japanese things. Whereas when it becomes a project, it almost feels like it could be a project within anywhere. It doesn't have this kind of like Japan kind of weird aspect to it. So I was quite surprised that you didn't try to implement that to the project. So I think that was why
we decided to be compartmentalized. The fun is only in the commercials break and no weird Japanese things in the project.
I don't know, like how should I say it? Because of that seriousness, you forget the kind of like funness of designing in a way. And I just thought that, how do you say, the topic power is such a strong and such a big, serious topic that you need a bit of that kind of like idiosyncrasy to it to make it into like a design. I just thought that that aspect was lacking a bit.
Yeah, I think maybe in addition to the fund, I mean, I think it is an important question, right? Because maybe without being partisan to the discipline, I think there are some projects which you could say, or maybe from the perspective of really engaging energy itself, or this problem itself, they're like the orchestra on the Titanic, right? So the question is, how does architecture also fulfill this role, you know, of being the orchestra on the Titanic? I mean, it's a kind of essential part of the discipline as well, not to be consumed by the kind of fatality of it, because that would maybe mean that, you know, there can no longer be any participation in this kind of debate. And I also would want to remind ourselves that all other disciplines engaging with it, you know, via specific takes in this debate, which basically concerns all disciplines and everybody, literally, on the planet, have similar or different kind of limitation, right? So I think there is always a kind of unexpected role also for things. Yeah, what you say, Ray, are let's say the kind of the oblique or the fun, or to really control. Because I mean, I would applaud Bill Gates's or whatever new like Sandra put in the chat, the kind of very specific developments within nuclear energy, which we have from our sort of ivory tower desks that have the possibility to be interested in or not. And there is other examples which actually might be a very serious technological solution, but which falls down on either political deaf ears or public opinion deaf ears. The very beginning of this kind of discussion to basically understand our own misunderstandings of this debate, you know, the kind of statistics that in France, for example, the majority of the people don't like nuclear energy because it's something that comes from the state and the state is bad. And second, they don't like nuclear energy because they think it's producing CO2. So there is all kinds of almost irrational ingredients in the debate where just keep repeating of stating the facts might be not enough, and you need somehow something else to also trigger a kind of development.
I guess that is why it's like a very fine line. When I say like try to do fun, I'm not trying to just say have fun. It's more about we are architects, so that is why the meeting point with the reality and your idea is the most. It has to be the most interesting and the fun part when you present it. And for some projects, I think that was the part that was lacking. And then if as architects, we're going to tackle this topic of power, we always have to like remember that we are architects and we have to implement that idea within the section or within the plan, whatever it could be. But you have to show that within that, or else we're not really, entrepreneurs who are trying to like pitch the idea to like get money for a project or anything. So I think that was the part that defines what is architecture project within what is different from like other projects.
Sorry, Alessandra, go ahead.
About this exercise, because I do similar studios that propose to the students really complex topics and I think and then I ask them to get to architecture and to respond as architects, and to know the limits of what architecture can do, but in order to do that you have to have in your mind very clearly what the game is, what are the terms of the problems. And actually, I wanted to raise this question about this other project, but I thought it was really interesting, the Timber Institute. So let's, we are architects. Let's be serious about architecture and materials. Architecture is and I think in this sense, the question of mining and all my research on mining and talking about lithium and coal, timber is another, but there is a group of, a lot of people around the world are working on timber buildings, on using wood for a number of different reasons. Like Norway did recently, and also in Vancouver, they recently did skyscrapers basically in timber, which is a bit of a crazy idea, but it's interesting. And all the smart city that you saw, the smart project of in Toronto, but now they dropped completely, but it was also completely, they decided to do it completely in timber. So it's like a big thing, timber now, and everybody's discussing about that and materials, but I like very much, there is a team here at McGill, at the University of McGill, which is not my university, I'm in the French one. And these people are, okay, I write the name. Simon Craig and Mo. I may be wrong in spelling the second name. So their problem is to really work seriously with matter and energy and power. And for example, we are in Canada, but they work in Africa, and actually Salman worked with Norman Foster on a number of projects. But so how to cool, so cooling of buildings and heating of buildings is, or data center. Yeah, let's talk about data center, how much power they burn. So this is one of the issues. Someone was talking about data center. So this is what consumes a lot of energy, for example. So they're thinking of, the problem of cooling buildings and heating also building, basically air conditioning buildings in a sort of natural way. So using the property of wood, for example, or other materials. So this, if you take, this is a problem good for an architect to work in collaboration. And this is, I think, what architects should do now, work in collaboration with scientists, and engineers to deal with this sort of problem and to define. So the problem, I think, in proposing this, like really, these studios and the challenge and the interesting part is to help the students to define what becomes architectural, or the possibility of the architecture in a context that all of us are living, and where we have to be responsible citizens, first of all, and second, and to be architects and responsible citizens. So I think it's very interesting, and it's a challenge, but there are ways of doing to that and get into architecture. So architecture can engage in a number of ways when the problem is very well defined, when the terms of the problem are very well defined. So I think the exercise of understanding, the big games of that corporations and states are playing it's important in order precisely to understand how you can operate as a responsible citizen and architect. Okay, I said my piece. And you have to have fun also. I agree with that. I think fun must be part of the thing, but
I might say we had a lot of fun, and also to continue on the idea of different scales, which was first outlined from Ray. And I think we as architects sometimes we have this modernist embarrassment where we are afraid to deal with the big scales or to even understand them. And here the idea of oligopticon comes to help. So the last thing that you mentioned also, Alessandra, the collaboration with scientists and so on, and the understanding on the meta level, it's not about the seriousness as it is about knowing then how to not use the conventional tools of architecture to deal with those problems. Because, again, like you mentioned, there are different rules of that game. So on a bigger scale, there are different set of tools, which architecture obviously cannot really tackle. However, it can produce some new tools with its own language that can achieve that can make a little difference to the system that then might extrapolate to other issues. And I think that was really fascinating about the studio on a note of reflection, is that you start to really think on the conventional tools and on the new tools and the way we represent what can be architectural and what is the threshold between architecture and then the systemic thinking. And I think that was something I'm fond of somehow.
I think that's a nice reflection, Gent. I wonder if any of our guests have any kind of concluding remark, and we can wrap it up. I think it's been a good discussion. Or one of the students.
I might add, like I lost some things. Firstly, I want to thank you for your very interesting presentations. I was thinking about some topics which trigger my attention after all those discussion, like some of the information about waste, for example. Most of the incineration plants are like in Tokyo, very close to the citizens. And I was wondering, maybe are the citizens more aware of waste and how it's, how is it incinerated so close to them? And like, I thought it was like, in my experience in Tokyo, kind of a contrast between being so close and being so present, and then not really dealt with it. And then also, for example, the energy overload, which is now by COVID, we have a lot of energy overload because of all these plants still generating energy and not being used. So I wonder if somebody had an answer to that. Right now. And then one last thing I thought about beforehand was the oligopticon. There's like a lot of cameras in Tokyo, and the way maybe these cameras or the way the oligopticon on Tokyo is already there, and how it influences people's behavior, and the way we can integrate it in energy consumption and how people deal with it. But these are just general remarks which were triggered by all of the very nice presentations. I think time is running out, so I don't want to block everything. I just have one small addition, maybe to Jack on Ginza. I don't know if he read Small Tokyo edited by Radovic Darko, who has a very nice, interesting Ginza area analysis who can be implemented in his Billboard study. That's all.
Oh, no, I haven't.
I'll type it.
Is it the book that talks about the tiny house, like small, the small ideology of the Japanese?
Yeah, it has multiple essays and on various topics, but the smallness is the overarching theme.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the themes is how the Tokyo metro lines or define your identity, but there's also one about how Ginza, very small plots and the setbacks, how it is very specific, and it could be applied to your Billboard study.
Going back to the incineration plant and the CCTV cameras, I think it's curious that they were subjects in the past. So if you, like I once talked about doing my project on CCTV cameras in Tokyo, and then the incineration plants, you can find it in one of the atlas of the Tokyo area.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll read about it.
Sana or Philip, would you have any concluding comments?
Yeah. Juan, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think I was trying to make a list of all the potential answers to what was previously asked, the idea of the role of the architect in such complex systems. And I was trying to recall the methodology of the course itself, because it's very easy to forget that we began working on this 4 months ago, and we even had the chance to go to Tokyo, to go to Paris. And the first meeting we ever had was looking at the 53 plans from Bruno Latour and the introduction of the oligopticon and the idea of understanding the system. And I think the question of the role of the architect, or what can we do within, was being asked since the first day. And I think throughout the course, we were simultaneously trying to understand the system by asking questions that could be answered in the future and in the immediate future of part 3 architectural projects. So I think by analyzing through case studies, by maps, but simultaneously asking spatial questions that could be answered later, became a kind of successful tool to see what can we do in a sense. So the understanding of the large scale that Ray was mentioning before, but then through this set of questions that were compiling over the weeks that eventually are brought to the architectural scale and brought to the bending machine that has a button. So I just wanted to recall this idea of, yes, there is the notion of understanding the system, but without forgetting that simultaneously there's this constant production of questions, spatial questions that could define the terms of the problem that Alessandra was pointing, that once the problem is well defined, then there's much more room to react.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's actually, in my opinion, that's an aspect which, I mean, but it goes particularly well for architecture, no? So we always say this thing, like when we, it's what they basically teach you in teaching class. You have to be always very clear in posing the assignment, right? And give enough resistances for a design problem to really be a design problem. But the same goes for a lot of other disciplines. I mean, we all know, or let's say even the kind of educate as a problem in education in general. It's always the complaint that in school or in university everybody learns to deal with clear problems, with clear ingredients, and then they're thrown out in the world where nothing is the way it's supposed to be. Because a problem is never clear. There is a lot of noise and distraction around it. And still you have to use these skills that are basically, you know, trained based on clearer parameters into the real world. So I think it's something which sometimes we forget that is, I guess, everybody, I mean, a lot of specialists to talk about the specialists of this kind of technocracy we were dealing with have the same problem. And they also use very similar crutches to go in the oversimplifications of the image, which in their case are maybe not a nice rendering, but in their case are the nice Excel sheet. So I think this is something, I think, fundamental to the difference between how we model reality and how reality is. I mean, I'm sorry, Juan, that I expanded a bit the point, but I think it's the insistence on the architect means the insistence on whatever I would say specialized take is. Something else, guys? Are we all happy?
That's a nice way to end the discussion. Thank you to our guests for engaging via this terrible Zoom. Thank you to
no, it was
Donna and Philip for leading the group, and thank you to the students for well, putting forward such an excellent effort despite all the circumstances. The quality of the work was exceptionally strong, I believe. So maybe even stronger than if we would have been physically in the studio together. But I don't know.
I understand. This is Salmon's point lately. He thinks this should always be like this.
Maybe. This is maybe. No, that's a joke. We shouldn't. We will be back in physical form come fall. But the no. But I think it does lead to another level of concentration. So.
What is happening for you? I'm interested. For us, it's very clear that it's going to be online in the fall. What about